Hey guys, and welcome back to another review on the Two Broke Gamers channel. This is the second review I've done on the channel. If you missed the first one where I talk about Ape Escape on PS1, that video will be in the description below, so go ahead and check that one out. But today I'm talking about one of my favorite games I ever played as a kid, and that is Pikmin. Specifically the GameCube version. Now, it's no surprise GameCube games have gone up in price. There's a lot of games that are more than what they retailed for nowadays, so you kind of got to dig deep into your pockets if you want to pick up GameCube games. But for some of us, luckily we already had them in our collection. Well, Pikmin's not one of them that I already had in my collection, because when I was a kid, I decided out with the old and in with the new. When I got the Xbox 360, I sold all my old games. Big regret of mine, but you gotta learn some way, right? Well, a few weeks back, I walked into my local game store, and there sat a very pristine, complete copy of Pikmin on the GameCube, and I just had to grab it. Now, I hadn't played this game in almost 14 years, so I wasn't sure if my nostalgia was taking over, and maybe the game isn't as good as I think it is, so that's why I wanted to replay it and beat it and get all 30 parts like I never did as a kid, and then review it. Now, I hope you guys will join me for my review of Pikmin, where I play it 14 years later and actually get all 30 parts. Alright, Pikmin is a very unique game, so it's a little tough to know where to begin, but I think we just start with the plot of Pikmin. So in Pikmin you play as a little astronaut named Olimar. He's taking a little spacecation, if you get what, the space vacation, that was horrible. While Olimar's flying through space, he ends up crashing into an asteroid, which sends him crash landing down onto a mysterious planet. The planet he lands on kinda resembles Earth, but from the perspective of an ant, because Olimar's just a wee little lad. As his ship comes crashing down onto the planet, all of his ship parts go flying off and flying in a bunch of directions, and now he has to go collect them all so he can return home. But Olimar is not capable of getting to and or carrying his ship parts, and that's where these little colorful bastards named Pikmin come into play. So let's talk about the gameplay then. Almost right away, Olimar encounters his first Pikmin, and he plucks that little bastard right out of the ground and puts him to work, and before you know it, the Pikmin's paying taxes and getting divorced. So with Olimar's first Pikmin, he's ready to start grabbing his parts and getting home, right? Not at all. You're going to need a lot more of these little dudes if you want to get your ship parts back. Oh, and you only have 30 days to do it, so get moving. That's right, once a day is completed, that day is checked off your 30-day calendar, and you repeat the cycle trying to get as many parts as you can each day. There are 30 parts total to be exact, so if you keep a pace of 1 part per day, you're golden, pony boy. Now, you only need 25 parts to technically beat the game, but if you don't get all 30 parts, you miss out on the good ending. But don't let this time mechanic push you away. It's very forgiving, and I promise you'll get all 30 parts within 30 days, even on your first playthrough. Now, in order to get all your parts back, you're not only going to need the help of Pikmin, but you're going to need the help of the 3 different types of Pikmin that you will find along the way. The first Pikmin you'll encounter is the red Pikmin. These Pikmin are the strongest of the bunch, so they make taking down the baddies nice and easy. And they can also walk through fire without being harmed, so they become a key factor in part retrieval. And then you run into the yellow Pikmin. These noseless, big-eared fellows can throw bomb rocks at walls to break them, allowing you to access parts and shortcuts, and they're also super light despite those ears, so they can reach things that no other Pikmin can reach. And lastly, you'll encounter the blue Pikmin. These Pikmin have gills which allow them to breathe in water, and they're the only Pikmin who can go in water, so be careful who you let in the pool. And it is also very crucial that you balance out the number of each color of Pikmin you have, because you never know when you're going to need a certain group to tackle an objective. Now, before I dive in and talk about what makes Pikmin great, I do want to get some of my personal gripes out of the way. While this game is amazing, it still has its air quote flaws. One thing that can get really frustrating is just how dumb these little guys can be. They just don't listen sometimes, and they randomly attack stuff without being commanded, and that gets annoying when you're trying to get from point A to point B, and you keep having to backtrack and recall the ones who randomly decided to 1v1 a patch of grass, and sometimes it leads to the death of some of the Pikmin. I know I said the time mechanic is fair and doesn't prevent you from getting all parts without knowing the game like the back of your hand, but it still gets annoying in the end when the time mechanic takes away exploration aspects outside of just locating the parts. I would love to just freely roam the brilliantly crafted environments and take it all in, but instead it feels like you have to rush to get your tasks done just by principle of the time limit. And small little spoiler about the sequel, Pikmin 2, it did get rid of the time limit, so that's nice. And honestly, that's really the only negatives I have about the game, So let's talk about what makes Pikmin fun. If plucking these little dudes from the fresh soil and throwing them at everything you see isn't good enough for you, I guess we can talk about some other stuff. But come on, it's pretty fun. One of the most enjoyable parts of Pikmin is learning the way of the land and solving the puzzles to complete your tasks. The puzzles are rather simple to solve, but they're very fun. Most of the fun comes from completing the puzzles after you know how to solve it, mainly because you use the Pikmin for every step of it, and those little Pikmin just put a smile on my face every time I see them work together. And oddly, I get that same smile on my face when I watch them die because they didn't listen. That's just sweet karma. Now, believe it or not, there is combat in Pikmin. It's very straightforward for the most part. Olimar can punch on his own for a small bit of damage, while the Pikmin can attack a single enemy with their huge number advantage. To take down an enemy, you simply throw all your Pikmin at it, or just corral them around it, and watch it fall. There are a few enemies that you need to knock out of the sky first, or you need to expose their weak spot, and honestly, it just adds a little bit of an element to it and makes it a bit more fun. But on the flip side of that, it can be very easy to have Pikmin die, so be very careful about the placement of Pikmin, because as soon as an enemy gets a hold of them and gobbles them up, they're gone for good. Well, unless you plant more, of course. While I was playing Pikmin again for the first time in over 14 years, I realized something pretty cool. This game is truly a masterpiece in its own right, because it took a formula that no video game has ever used. A formula that is basically chores. Yeah, like those chores. And it acts as a life lesson in a way as well. The game has you managing your time, understanding your environment and things around you, getting help from those around you, and gathering the mess of parts you made around the planet, because we gotta keep that environment clean. And all of those things are things you're gonna encounter early on in your life. Maybe aside from the last one, because not everyone has a spaceship just exploding into a million parts and you gotta go gather it, you know, that's a little obscure. But with all that being said, I would like to say Pikmin truly is one of my favorite games I ever played, and nostalgia didn't play a factor in it, even in the slightest, because I think I enjoyed it even more than when I played it when I was younger. With that being said, I would like to give Pikmin my official rating of 9 out of 10. So really, I recommend anybody who hasn't played it or hasn't played it in a while to go pick up Pikmin and give it a shot, because it truly is one of the best games. And if you have played Pikmin, I'd love to know how you feel about it. Did you like it? Couldn't really get into it? Doesn't matter which one you played, whether it was 1, 2, or 3. I don't know anything about the 3DS one, but, you know, maybe you like that one. But thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.